Hi guys, today we're going to do part 2 of the bones. The last bone we did was the fingers and toes, which were the phalanges. So now I'm going to do the lower half of the bones. We're going to start with this bone right here. It actually goes behind the sternum. This is your vertebrae. You know it as the spine. The spine is a very long bone, but it's not the longest. And the reason for that is between every single vertebra, that's the singular, is a piece of cartilage. We're going to talk about cartilage today too. And because of that, they can't count the vertebrae as the longest bone. Now, it's in sections. You don't have to know the names of the sections. If you go to a chiropractor because you have some, bone problems or spine problems, they'll tell you that, hey, you're having a problem with lumbar number 2. It means, this section right here, there's maybe a pinched nerve or a slipped disc. But what I want to talk about is how important the vertebrae or vertebral column is. It surrounds your spinal cord, and your spinal cord goes into the back of your head, where your cranium is, into the medulla oblongata. Don't worry, it's just called the medulla. That was the whole word. And depending on if you have an accident, can determine if, when they say you break your neck, if A, you pass away, or if you become a paraplegic, which is when you can't use your legs, or a quadriplegic, and quad means 4, you can't use your 4 limbs. This is very, very important, this area up here, because the medulla oblongata is in charge of your involuntary actions. We will talk about that when we get to the nervous system. And so we're going to continue down the vertebrae, and right here, this last portion is called the coccyx. You know it better as the tailbone, but the tailbone does not have the spinal cord in it. Spinal cord ends about here. But the importance of the coccyx is that it gives shape to our buttocks, literally. At one time, we did have a tail, back in cavemen times, and eventually through evolution, we didn't need a tail, which would give us balance because we stand on 2 legs. But the coccyx bone happens to get damaged an awful lot. Now, you might break it, you could bend it. It sits basically behind the rectum, which is part of the large intestine. But the number one way that people break it or bend it is with falling, especially on a hard surface. So ice hockey actually is the number one way this gets, for sports that is, that it gets bent. And of course, you can't get casted for that. That would be a little weird to cast this whole area. But you would be sitting on what they call a blow-up donut, and you would sit and the bone could heal without any pressure to it. Now, this area right here, you know it as the hips. This is called the pelvis. And those of you who have ever heard of the singer Elvis Presley, Elvis had a knack of dancing with his hips. He would move his hips or gyrate his hips, and people kind of like that. So pelvis rhymes with Elvis. But this section here was actually in sections when you were born. I wish I really was in class with you so I could show you that sometimes different people have different size pelvises. Now, this would be a male pelvis, okay, because it is narrow and it's in line with the rib cage. However, for a woman, the pelvis actually moves further outward. And the reason for that is when you become pregnant, the fetus actually sits on this bone here called the pelvic bone. It is part of the pelvis, and you need a wider hip area so that when you're about to give birth, the fetus can turn and then come out the birth canal. But in this diagram with Oscar, and even Oscar in my classroom, he would be a male skeleton because the pelvis is so narrow. So now we're going to go down the legs. These 2 bones here, well, now you're up to your longest and strongest bones. It's called, you know it as the thigh bone, but this is called the femur. Very hard to break your femur because it is so strong. The femur gives a lot of stability for walking And a lot of times, if I could pick a sport that breaks the femur, you have to be going pretty darn fast. Don't get me wrong, a car accident can break your femurs, but any type of skiing or maybe your snowboarding, if you go out of control, there's a good chance, because you're going so fast, you could break your femurs. One of the movies that I absolutely love is called The Blind Side, and many of you probably have seen The Blind Side. It's a story about Michael Orr. He was a football player in the Baltimore Ravens, on the Baltimore Ravens, and he was adopted. But the opening of that movie, Sandra Bullock is talking about how it's very important for you having the insurance for your house, because there was a terrible injury that occurred to, I'm not kidding you, his name is Joe Theismann, occurred during a football game with the New York Giants, where Lawrence Taylor tackled him. It was a clean tackle, but the way his feet were, it broke his femur and all the other leg bones too. But it's really hard to break these bones. So you can imagine during that tackle, and it shows it in The Blind Side, the opening scene of The Blind Side. You should go look at that. It was a career-ending injury for Joe Theismann. He never threw another football. You might see him on TV as a commentator during football season on Channel 2, but this bone, he had to have surgeries, and he had to learn how to walk again because it was a devastating blow. This is a very hard bone to break, and if it does break, you got to go through a lot of physical therapy and possibly some surgeries. Okay, so that is your thigh bone or your femur. This little bone right here is your patella. You know it better as your kneecap. Your kneecap is actually attached to your femur, and it covers your knee when you are standing upright. When you're sitting down and the knee is bent over, the cap is on the top of your leg. It's just for protection, but the thing is the patella has a habit of moving, and it really shouldn't move. And if it slides out of place, you could have something called water on the knee, and they have to, take the water out because it doesn't allow you to bend your knee. But the number one sport that, we'll use the term, dislocates their knee, or their kneecap, I should say, the patella, is either baseball or softball. And the reason for that is sliding. Some people do not know how to slide properly into a base, and if they fall irregularly, this can go out of place, and so it gets dislocated. And once you dislocate, it's going to happen again and again and again, just like breaking a bone. Good chance you're going to break it again. And now you have your two lower leg bones. This right here, and it's on this side too, is your shin, but you're going to have to know it as your tibia. Those of you who play soccer, and I know I have many of you that play soccer, if you get kicked in that tibia area, the shin, it hurts, okay? And that is the number one sport that damages the shin, the tibia, because you're wearing, shin guards, but sometimes when you get kicked, it hurts really, really bad. And when we talk about the parts of the bones, you'll see why it hurts so bad. It's called a bone bruise. But the tibia, okay, is very, very strong. It's thicker than the other leg bones. See, when we did the upper arm bones, these were both the same, I should say the lower arm bones. These were both the same size and width. This was the tibia, that's the ulna. But when we talk about the lower leg bones, tibia is definitely a lot thicker than this itty bitty teeny weeny bone right here. The lower leg bone is called the fibula. Okay, now I know the words sound similar, tibia, fibula. Don't make up your own words. Don't call it a fibia or a tibula. That doesn't work. You're not allowed to do that. This is a tibia, and this is your fibula, and it's very, very thin. And a good kick to this can break it. Okay, so I know we talked about how with the ulna, usually the ulna breaks before the radius. Well, the fibula breaks before the tibia, usually. And when people say they break their ankle, well, the problem is this fibula, okay, the lower leg bone, is actually in the ankle area. And if you twist your ankle, most of the time you're breaking the fibula. You're not really breaking the ankle, because the ankle bones are just like the carpals, which were your wrist bones. You have lots and lots of ankle bones here called tarsals. And I'm not saying you can't break a tarsal, but most of the time when you say, oh, I broke my ankle, it's usually because of this fibula. Most of the bones in your body are found in your hands and in your feet, because there's so many itty bitty bones. The smallest bones of your body are actually in your ear. In your ear. You have the hammer, the stirrup, and the anvil. Okay, so it's hard to break those bones, of course. But these are all the bones you're responsible for. How do they stay in place? Well, then that would be connective tissue. There's something called ligaments, which connect bone to bone, sort of like if you could imagine a rubber band ball wrapped around, let's say, around your ankle, around your knee, around your elbow. And I have twisted my ankle so many times, I have ripped the ligaments out of my ankle at least 4 times. And they say it is more painful to rip a ligament than to break a bone. And I'm going to have to agree on that, because there's that dull ache. And yeah, I got casted for it, especially with my ankles. What connects bone to muscle is called a tendon. Your most popular tendon connects your heel bone to the back of your calf. Tendons connect bone to muscle. Without muscle, you wouldn't have the flexibility to walk. So your tendon would connect a bone to a muscle. You also have a famous tendon that connects your tongue to your mandible. Okay, that's that. If you lift up your tongue and you see like a little string underneath your tongue, that is a tendon. And then the last connective tissue is cartilage. Cartilage is a bluish-white rubbery material that, yes, is found at your outer ears. Okay, some of you may get your cartilage pierced. Okay, when you lay on your ear, you don't want that to be bone, because you would break your bone. Your nose, the tip of your nose is made of cartilage. Imagine if it was all bone, okay? You'd rub your nose and you'd break your nose. But you also have cartilage that's found in between every single bone, because you need a cushion. Bone on bone is very, very painful because you have nerves. And so the wearing away of cartilage is called arthritis. I'm sure you have heard that. But arthritis, that can happen to anybody at any age. There are children that are born without any cartilage, and it is extremely painful. Bone on bone is when you are on your nerves, and it hurts. You can't walk. You can't use your arm. It's very, very painful. So your connective tissues are ligaments, which connect bone to bone. You got lots of them. Looks like a big rubber ball around all your bones. You have your tendons, which connect bone to muscle. We'll get to muscles eventually in this chapter. And then you have cartilage, which is that bluish-white rubbery material that you can find, on your nose, on your ears. Even right here, the rib cage gets connected to the sternum by cartilage. But most of all, if it gets worn away, you will develop arthritis. And it doesn't discriminate. It can happen at any age. So take care of your bones. Those of you who are in softball or baseball, wear those knee guards where it looks like you're sitting on cushion on the back of your legs. It's going to save you later on. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's lesson. I hope you're getting a feel for your bones. You all have these. In the next lesson, I will send you a picture of Oscar, a bigger picture of Oscar, and we'll go slow. All right? This is a fun chapter. Have a great day, guys. I hope you're doing well. Bye-bye.